Entrepreneurship
on 702.
Andisa Ramavhunga is my guest, Group Chief Advisor at Ntiyiso Consulting. We continue with our conversations around entrepreneurship, competitiveness in that space. And we're talking about 3 ways an entrepreneur can beat the competition. And Andisa is here with me in the studio. Andisa, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you, Aubrey.
So, interesting conversation in the previous hour, by the way. And I suppose aspects of some of those principles will come into this conversation as we talk about being competitive in business, regardless of the size of the business that you're in. But I would like to take your comments around the idea that, particularly in this Trumpian space of the tariff wars, what do you make of ideas that suggest collaboration of companies in certain sectors to look at other markets as a collective, not as individual businesses? I've just had that conversation now. I think it's a brilliant idea, but what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Look, for me, collaborations are key to business. If you remember how we unpack this strategy, one of the big components is called strategic partnerships, whether you call it joint ventures. I call it the support that you require to deliver your strategy or your work, or to deliver to your market. I think entrepreneurs need to come to this thinking that you can't do everything yourself. You need to specialize and be good at something else and channel your resources and your energy into those advantages. I guess we'll talk about some of them today that we are very good at, and then get strategic partners to outsource to complement the work that you do. I know there's ways of people saying that they are competing by, and you hear these words called vertical integration, where you go back to the value chain and you start owning everything to the back of where you are positioned in the value chain. Some of them even front integration. I'm of the firm belief that collaborations are key, and you can't be a jack of all trades. And if you at least understand that principle, we are then able to at least segment the pie and concentrate on those capabilities that are of a competitive advantage to you, and allow other people and partner with other people. And you can take that message to market. By the way, there's a very interesting theory in economics about the competitiveness of nation. I think it was Adam Smith came with the breakdown of work, and there was Ricardo who argued that nations specialize in certain skills, and that's why we exchange in terms of trade and so forth. I'm also a firm believer of that, because we are uniquely positioned as countries, and we possess certain features that other nations don't possess. So I'm not a big fan, by the way, of Trump, and I think it's misplaced. I think with my basic understanding of economics and those tariffs that Trump do, and this deficit that he always talks about, that really never makes sense, because trade is not like for like, right? I mean, they buy more because they are richer than us, and they consume much more than us, and there's only so much you can buy of them. It's like going to the supermarket and saying that you have a deficit with the supermarket, and yet you are the one consuming and having the buying power to buy from the supermarket, and therefore argue that the supermarket needs to pay you back because you have the buying power. It just doesn't make sense. But maybe to answer your question directly, collaborations are key. I wouldn't, as a South African, even having those special skills, go into the continent, into an environment that I know nothing about. There are certain skills around understanding the local terrain, understanding the local buying patterns, understanding the regulations, understanding how the business make up that necessitates that even if you are good at something else, if you're entering a market, you need to have at least some collaboration with the people that are there. Yeah, so I'm in favor of collaborations. Yeah. And in nations distinguishing themselves in terms of competitive advantage. And let's share the pie, man. Why would you want to do everything else yourself? Yeah.
Let's talk about the 3 ways an entrepreneur can beat the competition. Yeah. I imagine in that space is going to be some form of collaboration, but you've looked at 3 ideas, and that is lowering costs, differentiation, and value innovation. What are all of these ideas? By the way, Stephen Groot has asked me to tell you that another feature of that would be to listen to The Money Show.
Point taken. Point taken. So I think let's take a step back Aubrey, and anchor what we are having a conversation on based on the wider topic that we talk of strategy, right? The biggest concern I have, at least on when people talk strategy, and big corporations do that a lot, by the way, even startups with entrepreneurship, this concept of business planning is deeply rooted in planning and not strategy. I guess that's why we're talking about way of competing. What you find often is missing in strategic plans, and people like combining these words to say it's a strategic plan, as if you'll make that plan strategy. And yet all you are talking about is just a set of activities that you want to prioritize and do, which, by the way, has its own place in business. And the art of business planning as well has largely relied in those set of activities. Those set of activities like we need to build a new factory, things like we need to expand to new geographies, things like we need to invest maybe in some what you call this remuneration short-term incentive plan or long-term incentive. All those things are nice and well and could very well be activities that we do in a business to enhance at least our proposition, but they are meaningless if they are not done in an absence of strategy. And strategy is exactly that. It's a set of choices. And I love what Roger Martin, I keep on referring to him, and Lefley on how they define this strategy. Remember we said it's how a business, in fact, I would even argue it's the logic, it's the formula, or it's the theory of how a business creates and captures value. And Roger Martin whittles it down to 5 questions, but 3 of those questions, which are very essential, is a set of choices that you make around where you play. What that means is that what sort of products do you take to which of those markets, thereby creating the value that we defined by that top line that is called revenue, because that's how you create the value, right? And how you then how are you going to win in those markets, which is the logic or the source, right? And this is now the question of to say, how are you going to win? Is it are you going to be a lowest player, which is competing on pricing, or are you going to differentiate? And by the way, if you differentiate, are you aware what you're differentiating on? Is it something that a consumer or the customer, your market segments, really values? And then there's this new emerging theory out of the school of blue ocean strategy. Well, it's not new now because it's probably over 20 years old, by Renee Maboni and Kim Chen, that talks of value innovation. Is about taking both low cost and differentiation and putting it together to create new value, uncontested market, basically making competition irrelevant. That's what they are arguing. And again, there's a set of science behind how you do all the 3, and that's what we want to unpack today.
Give us a call, 011-883-0702. Have you thought deeply enough about the logic of your strategy? Yeah? The logic of your strategy, and what is the fundamental chassis of that logic? Is it around competing on price? Is it about differentiating yourself from your competitors who are in the same business? Or is it about coming up with a whole new different approach to engaging with your market? Yeah, that your whole value proposition is so vastly different that there is no competition. Yeah. That's a very, very interesting thing. I'm interested to get a sense of the practical examples for each of those 3 sort of variations. Give me a sense of what does that 3rd pillar look like, where there is innovation, value innovation.
So what the guys argue, and I'll try to simplify this, is that within a given industry, there are a set of factors that businesses compete on. And they've got a very nice tool they call it a strategy canvas that you can list all of them. And it's either those factors are high or low in industry. Let me give you a typical example with the airline industry, and you'll see where this value innovation came in very well. You found that typically airlines would compete on price, which was very high in terms of competing, and they were beating each other. They had this model that we call hub and spoke model, meaning that they all gathered onto one center and distribute. Again, that's how they use. And again, that was a very high competing factor. And other things, by the way, like catering, food in the plane, things like having a lounge in an airport. That's what traditional airlines used to do. And obviously they were offering it to a certain market, mainly business travelers, as well as retail travelers. But the pricing was highly competitive. The blue ocean guys are the low cost guys. Southwest Airlines, Womengo, in the time, about Kulula, British Airways. If you remember, what they actually did is take all those factors and decide which of those factors to eliminate completely or reduce their importance. And and this is now on the low cost side to drive the cost down. An example is, let's get rid of the food in the plane. That's why you buy it in the low cost, because actually consumers don't care about that, right? They just want
especially for short,
for short
distance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they thought, we'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of air lounges. I mean, if you remember, Kulula didn't end, or you could argue you could use the BA ones, but Kulula is a low cost airline, didn't own any of its own lounges in airports. So they got rid of that. The other model they got rid is this hub and spoke. So they flew point to point. So Kulula would fly directly from here to Durban, from Durban to Cape Town. So it's point to point catering for those. But what became very interesting there is they started adding other factors, right? Like this new the fun factor. If you remember, all of them, Mango, very fun, hippie, comedic in terms of the ease of buying the tickets. They eliminated a lot of the infrastructure around that and went mostly online.
It was around the beginning of the Nando's Chicken
absolutely
ad campaign that really used humor and current affairs.
I mean, even the way they deliver the message on safety, if you remember, it was very hilarious. But the more important thing is they then went for the segment of the market that were not literally the travelers. In fact, they took away a lot of, because their price points, you'll remember they reduced it completely. And how they reduced that is by eliminating all these things that they do not believe were factors of competition in the airline industry, and increase certain factors, right? But what they then did is then compete with the bus markets. Because if you remember those price points, I mean, if you think about a Greyhound from Johannesburg to Durban, they started eating into those markets and delivering that price point. So that's in a way what value innovation is. And you can take it, by the way, to barber or hair salon, or what do you call them? Barber shops. Where other people will say, to use just a silly example, is to say, maybe let me not offer a number of hairstyles, right? Let me just offer Chiscope and just specialize on Chiscope. That will mean I don't have to stock certain things. That will mean my machinery and equipment I have.
Or I don't invest in hair salons. I simply travel to the client.
To the client, and all I do is bring my barber and clipper. So your costs are reduced, but you can add those things convenient. I can come to your house, which are new factors. And by the way, I don't maybe use electricity, but I use there's these new
solar things,
all those things, and I can find a sweet spot. And I can find, by the way, people who want to cut their hair but they don't have time, who are always busy in office, and you can target. If you think about consultants, bankers, investment bankers in particular, those guys lawyers who work long hours and have no time for the natural grooming, that becomes your niche market segments. Those are the guys that you then provide that particular service to. Those are called value innovators, because what they do reduce the cost by eliminating some or reducing some competitive factors, but they do increase differentiation in a way that they add something new to their value proposition. And then more often than not, it's targeting a particular segment of the market. And that's why they call it a blue ocean, because you'll find that you are the only one who's doing that, and you have that market.
So there's no competition.
There's no competition. Obviously, with competition, eventually it will get red. That's what they call it. That blue ocean will get bloody. Because people will find ways of, particularly if it's quite lucrative, right? People will find ways to come in and copy your style and then make that ocean red. But how you then keep yourself out of the blue ocean is continuously reinvesting in improving value proposition and finding new ways of competing by, as I've said, reducing or eliminating and adding.
But isn't that just differentiation?
No, it's not differentiation, because differentiation is let's talk Uber. And by the way, I'm saying there's a science to this. I'm cheating you in value, because there's quite a lot. I said there's a value, what do they call, a strategy canvas that you need to keep all the time, and you need to keep thinking about it. It's a science that you do, and we'll go into the other ones. But differentiation is when we offer exactly the same product, except that we and I use the analogy of painting just to make the thing vivid. Remember, we had a conversation, you and I, where we are both painters, but maybe I have a skill of painting big buildings, and all you can do is retail. And I can paint big buildings just because of the infrastructure I've invested in, and the type of access to market or clientele that I have. Vis-a-vis, you are painting just normal houses, and there is someone who's a painter, but is a graphic artist. So we are all painting, but we are differentiating and targeting different markets. So this one is very much based on our last conversation around value proposition design, because it's about differentiating yourself based on what the pain you are actually solving for and what gains you are actually providing for the client, but doing the same product. I mean, if you look at the streaming platforms, for examples, if you look at Apple, and they're all in the game of entertainment, but there is a very subtle benefits and pains that they are solving. If you look at, for example, Netflix, as I would even argue with Apple, although Netflix much more than Apple. In fact, Apple, I would argue, they're more in a documentary space, enlightening space, and these guys are more in the blockbuster space. Amazon will come in there, but they are more local. They spend quite a lot in the, I would argue, more than these other guys, but I stand corrected with the strategy. But you'll see the differentiation in the content that they produce. But typically, the wider base of their libraries would typically be the same. It's just those little types of new content that they are bringing in that will be a differentiator. What you'll typically see, the difference between, by the way, a differentiator and a value innovator. Value innovators will typically be monopolies in a way, if we're looking for a better word, but monopoly in a very artificial way, not in a very direct way, in terms of using legislation or so forth and so forth. But yeah, there is quite a distinct difference between the two. So this other one, typically what you'd find on the differentiators is you'll find a lot of money being pumped into branding, because one of the key ways that you differentiate yourself is really finding that sweet spot in your problem solution fit, or call it value proposition market fit, where you are able to position yourself in the mind of the consumer. And I'll give you a typical example. Think Coca-Cola and Pepsi.
Yeah.
They are both in the cola business. In fact, other people, there's been a study, by the way, of blindfolded people who could not tell the difference between
Coca-Cola and Pepsi.
Yeah.
Really?
Between taste. That study was done. It was quite hilarious. And yet, I would argue in different jurisdiction, take Africa, for example, Coca-Cola will be a leader, and it's typically a factor of marketing. What you typically find there is that there isn't that much difference in the utility of the product. Maybe that's the word I should use. What changes a lot in the differentiation is more around the service, the channel space, the customer relationship, and definitely the branding element of it.
So we're talking about your value proposition, the logic of it. Yeah. So you might think you're in the same business, but maybe you're doing the same business differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And have you actually thought about that? Have you thought about how you can differentiate yourself, or maybe add value in such a way that you have blue sky, blue ocean, I think is what you were saying, where you simply don't have any competitors? Perhaps you are in the business of fighting for a client on the base of price. Yeah? Give us a call, 011-883-0702. Would love to hear your thoughts about this. Is there room to think about this in terms of the evolution of a business? In other words, can one assume that at the beginning of a venture, a business, the issue is going to be more about price? And as you mature, then it's going to be about differentiation. And as you mature from there, then it's going to be about value. Or can you start at value?
You can start at
any
value.
of those
if you think
pillars,
the likes of Facebook, I would even argue. Look, value innovation does not say you have no competition at all, right? It's just very little competition,
Sure.
and the distinction is vast. You'll see typically one of the big companies are actually value innovators. If you look at Google with their search engine and what they've been able to do. You look at Uber as well. Those are all blue ocean type. You remember they took a very traditional taxi business and revolutionized it and made it a platform. And again, there's quite a lot that they do.
There's a good example. Huh?
In terms of blue ocean. But to answer your question, Aubrey, I always say that it's a question of awareness, right? You think you are starting, as long as you are making decisions on how to create value, as answering those three questions. That Roger Martin and Lefley asked around what products are you going to take to which market. So this is your way to play a conversation, right? What capabilities must you have to serve and compete in that? Whether you know it or not, you are making those decisions, because the reality is that if you're starting new and you're coming into a red ocean, by the way, you are competing. You might not know that you are competing, and more often than not, you find that your business does not become sustainable because you have not become aware that you need to compete on price. You need to compete on capabilities, or what they call competitive advantage that you have. You have to be clear, at least in your mind, to say, if I enter an industry, am I a blue ocean player, or am I a highly differentiated business, right, or I'm coming in to play on price? Because it is a strategy, by the way, to come in and play on price. It's just a different strategy, because there you have to invest in low-cost strategies across your value chain, from how you source. I mean, strategic sourcing is very key there. How you the supply chains to get stuff to your factory, how you manufacture and produce. By the way, this is where these things around lean production and Kaizen come in, because it's about being a very low cost producer. How you distribute to market, what sort of channels are they, low cost channels or not, and ultimately leading to the price point that you give, because all of those things must come back to deliver a price point. You cannot say that you're a low cost guy if you're the most expensive guy in the in the industry.
I watch the automobile space at the moment, how the Chinese cars are decimating the traditional sort of German luxury cars in this market. And I make that observation, understanding that there was a time where Chinese products were sort of frowned upon as less quality, presenting a less level of quality. I mean, we even have had things like Giri Fong Kong, because people understood them to be of a lesser quality than perhaps other products coming from other countries. So I imagine that products coming from China didn't only have the issue of having to compete against higher quality products, but also the perception that existed around Chinese products, the stigma, the stereotypes, even the prejudice that might have existed in the thinking about how you participate in that market. Chinese products in the car space are considered to be high value if you look at the price. Relative to the price, they are considered to be of high value. In fact, some people argue that they compete quite strongly against the traditional German or European luxury cars. What thinking should they have adopted, or did they adopt, in order to be such dominant players in the South African car or high level sort of luxury, sort of high end
in the global space? By the way, in fact, I argue that that's a very good case for value innovation, this blue ocean strategy.
So it isn't price.
It's not only price. Look, they're not the cheapest out there.
Yeah.
if you think about it, in fact, you still do get some Japanese cars that are cheaper than the Chinese ones. Yeah, but for the luxury that you buy and the technology you buy, they are a low cost. But price is a big factor. They would have mapped the key competing factors, and I would argue that the reason why they could not crack it is because quality and durability ranked highly in the factors of competition in the manufacturing, in the automotive space, right? Luxury and the quality of the luxury mattered a lot in the branding, played a very big role in if you were to map all those factors in the what you call the strategic canvas, right? Distribution, if you remember even still now, the dealerships and how aesthetically good they look, right?
Yeah.
In terms of advertising and the type of communities that BMW, Mercedes-Benz. I mean, you might argue, in fact, there's an old adage saying that a BMW driver and a Mercedes driver are not the same people. In fact, people think Mercedes drivers are much older, much more sophisticated.
Yeah.
It's a branding thing, right?
Yeah.
These other ones are much more youthful, speedy type element. And then you get the VW drivers who are maybe even much younger. And it's in the branding space that they used to play it. I don't think the Chinese were good in certain factors, by the way. Definitely not on the quality one. Definitely not on the durability one. They struggled on the post-purchase and servicing element of the industry. And I would even argue on the distribution side with the aesthetics of their. I mean, if you remember well, these are not Chinese guys, but when Tata came in, again, is a low cost from India. I think they were terrible in the way that they packaged, and that retail channel did not look too aspirational, and you obviously could not compete at that level. And it was so when Toyota was able to land with all these other bells and whistles. I think the Chinese have done very well in matching at least the
after sales service,
even the luxury and the durability part, and they were able to drop the price element, and therefore they were in the game. I mean, if you
so they became blue ocean as a result of that. So what you're saying to me is that they combined all of those factors: cost, marketing, in other words, aspirational sort of ideas, plus when they combined all of that. It resulted in the so at least match those guys at that level, but beat them on. Do you think that this was deliberate?
By the way, on technology, people would argue that they're even much better than the Germans and on technology. So their technology is of a much higher quality. So they obviously raised certain elements of the competition.
Do you think that this is a result of actually thinking about the logic that informs your strategy? Because that's the conversation we're really having here. And by the way, please give us a call, 011-883-0702. You've heard some of the different examples that Andisa is talking about in real business. Businesses that are in the innovation or value innovation space, businesses that are in the differentiation space, businesses that are in the price sensitive space,
price sensitive space.
And are you looking at your business at the moment and thinking, I'm actually in the price sensitive space here? Or have you started to perhaps innovate in terms of your marketing, in terms of the ideas that are associated with your value proposition, that you are perhaps marketing to a particular segment of society? Are you aspirational in the way that you are selling yourself, your goods, your services? Or have you reached the place where nobody can touch you? You're simply not in the same game as everybody else. Yes, you might be painting. You might be selling cars. You might be
baking,
whatever the case may be. I mean, I listened to a conversation about how Porsche sells their cars. Or is it Porsche or is it Boeing? I can't remember which one it is, but one of those guys makes sure that they are at a Boeing exhibition. plain guys.
Yeah.
But they sell their cars at a Boeing exhibition.
Yeah.
So anybody that comes to you to come and talk to you about that car is already somebody that you don't have to worry about whether or not they can afford it.
Yeah.
That's not an issue.
That's a channel strategy, right?
Yeah.
How you use your channels, your distribution channels.
Yeah.
That's exactly in there. And I will call it differentiation and not so much value innovation. Because what you typically find, particularly with the very high-end cars, what they've mastered very well, obviously if I can ask you today, I'm sure the difference between a very, very high-end Mercedes-Benz and a very, very high-end Bentley, I think the performance is minuscule. In fact, there are some studies.
Or the difference in
performance,
performance.
It's very minuscule, even in branding, even in quality, right? But where you typically find that they are differentiating themselves is in the customer relations management, as well as the distribution channel. Yeah. I heard a story, I don't know how true is this, that says Ferrari sells more. There's a long queue for new Ferrari owners because they give priority to existing owners, and because they limit the productions that they do in a particular, again, to increase their desirability and make them scarce commodities. That drives the price.
I heard exactly the same story around diamonds.
Yeah.
Somebody was explaining that diamonds aren't that rare, actually.
Actually, very useless as a stone. I think they cut steel. What else?
They cut other diamonds.
They cut other diamonds.
Anyway, but the idea that diamonds are rare is something that we've been sort of fed as a marketing strategy, I suppose. Yeah. Because a company like De Beers buys up all of the mines, buys up all of the diamonds that exist, and then creates a demand by creating scarcity and thereby creating value for their products. But this individual was explaining that diamonds actually aren't that rare.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
The idea of the rareness of diamonds was created by the monopolization of that space by De Beers. They bought up all of the mines. They bought up all of the diamonds that exist. And so diamonds become a rare commodity, right? And for that reason, they can then play around with the price. And then they push the marketing that, if you really love somebody, then you got to buy them diamonds, and it becomes a whole strategy. What is that? Is that innovation value? Is that differentiation? What is that?
In fact, I would argue that those are low-cost guys who were very clever in the game and moved into a differentiation space. There's a very interesting debate around competition in a business space. If you follow people like Peter Thiel, they'll tell you that no one is a winner in competition. In fact, competition is for fools. So what those guys, I think, did very well, by the way, and you'll see that there are strategies, again, in terms of the low-cost people, right? You obviously need to have certain level of economies of scale. I think they did as De Beers grew with the diamond. They initially, I would argue, and somebody must keep me honest with the history, they were also in the game like everyone else, but they got very good at mining this and creating certain things around balance sheet and cash, and started acquiring those mines. But here's an interesting thing that happens there. They quickly were able to take something that is a commodity and made it a gem. Because as I've said, the usefulness of, and I hope there are engineers that are out there that will tell us what the usefulness of diamond is. Isn't that highly useful as a product? But what the guys,
its utilitarian value is actually quite low.
It's very low. Yeah. But what those guys did is one, consolidated, because they had a balance sheet. But where they were very clever was in the branding element of diamonds, which I said was a way of competing, which is where they made it the girl's best friend. By the way, there's a huge campaign and drive. I don't know, at some point in history, it would have been probably in the 70s, or with the advent of the Americans becoming. I remember
when that movie Diamonds Are Forever with James Bond. It was part of that campaign.
Of making it the girl's best friend. And because the value of the diamond itself is in the sentimentality that people place on it, and that's why we pay these huge prices for them. But as for their utility, it's not there. But again, I'm saying this is. I would argue it is actually blue ocean that you're saying, because it's about them turning something that's very commodity based and transforming it to becoming a differentiated business, to becoming a monopoly where they're the only ones who are playing and or at least the largest dominant provider.
I want to play you a voice note, and you know, because we might be perceived to be going to De Beers, to Apple, to but many South African entrepreneurs are perhaps at a different level, but the principles remain the same. Yeah.
In fact, I'll give you an analogy of a business that I've been watching. I've had an opportunity of meeting the owner, the guy who polishes shoes at airports. How brilliant do you think that business is?
Yeah.
He's got a monopoly. Who else does that in an airport?
Sure.
So he's chosen his way to play very well. He's chosen how he's going to compete by going into the airport. And I'm not sure how he's protecting so that there's no competition in there. But more importantly, investing in capabilities around cleaning shoes at a very quick time and be able to. I've seen now they've even gone cashless, right? You can either pay cash or via a screen. That's a classical case of a business, South African business, by the way, in a very simple thing of polishing, cleaning up shoes, and their positioning there, their channel there is absolutely impeccable, because I think this is how they've decided they're going to win this game. I mean, they're in a game like everyone else of polishing shoes or of cleaning, or if they're competing with dry cleaning, but they've chosen a very niche place of travelers. They know there's a lot of business people there, or a lot of travelers who are going to very swanky events, and they're waiting for you, and they're able to clean your shoe in a very quick space of time and able to convert that into value in the bank.
Here's a voice note.
Hi, good evening, Aubrey, Nora here in Heidelberg. You know, I've been running an ice cream business here in Ratanda. I'm the only one with ice cream machines and KFC, of course. So what I've learned in the past 3 years that I've been running my small business is that never compromise on quality. So I give quality ice cream, and that means that the customers are becoming my advertisers. They advertise because they're always raving about the ice cream. The youngsters take pictures and post on Facebook and everywhere. So I think never compromise on quality. And everybody says, no, my ice cream is better than KFC, and that's a badge of honor for me. So for me, even if it's not cheap, but quality is the best.
Yeah. Differentiation.
Yep.
I'm not sure what recipe she's using, but exactly that. She's competing in the utility space, providing the best tasting ice cream in a particular geography, and therefore being able to, according to what she's saying, price it a bit higher. And I think she can work, or if she has not, it sounds as if that word of mouth is working as a marketing tool, and she has created that community. Again, channel is very important. I'm not sure how she's planning and harnessing that. Yeah, so she's in the differentiation space.
It appears that you've got to understand what it is that you're selling, right? So yes, you sell, the ultimate product is ice cream.
Yeah.
But are you selling convenience in terms of space, in terms of, you know, proximity?
Yeah.
Are you selling price? Are you, so what you're saying here is that in order to be competitive, and maybe even that win that, you've got to understand what you are selling.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond the utilitarian, not just quality, but nature of the product, whatever it is. It goes beyond that. You've got to understand what it is that you're selling.
Let me give you a dimension, and again, this is stolen in a book, that Blue Ocean book, where they say that you should map out your your product, and we spoke about this when we spoke value proposition design, right? To say the work that needs to be done for a consumer to enjoy your product, right? There's how they purchase it. There's how it gets delivered to them, how they use it, the supplements and all those other things that are required. And there's also how they dispose of it. Those are all work to be done. And by the way, you can compete in, although you couldn't become maybe the easiest to access product, or maybe you're not the easiest to access, but on the utility point of view, you are probably the best, or on the disposal. And they have, again, other dimensions they have there against each and every one of those. That says, is it the utility itself that's better?
Yep.
Is it the simplicity? Is it the ease of use? Is it the fun factor? There was also the risk element as well. Remember, we touched on the risk element when we spoke the e-hailing, to say how many parents are out there worried about just putting their children in an e-hailing thing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's not really about the product itself, because to move people from A to B is actually quite easy, but it's about the risk element that's associated with that e-hailer. And if somebody can answer that question, that becomes a very now niche around moms and dads who care about safety and want to use e-hailing, which is again another blue ocean strategy, or if you mention it, because you can reduce other elements. If for example you don't care about the quality of the car, if you don't care about the make of the car, you mostly focusing on the risk aspect of it. Or you can decide to be a differentiator, to say, I'll match the e-hailing guys, but I'm going to increase my factor of competition would be the risk element. I'm going to create a peace of mind and. So
I mean, it sounds to me like you're saying you can't just set up. Whatever it is you set up, if you're going to put up a website,
yeah,
if you're going to have physical offices, if you're going to buy a factory, it's not just about being able to make a particular product or service available.
Yeah.
You've got to go beyond that. You've got to understand to whom, when, how, why.
Yeah. So where to play, which is the product market fit, or call it the problem solution fit, is the how am I going to win, which is the source. What is it that I'm going to compete on? Why would people come to me and not the rest of the guys? Or am I the only guy who's playing in there? Which is either cost or differentiation or value innovation. And the third one becomes, what capabilities must I have internally to support my competing strategy?
Andisa Ramavhunga, Group Chief Advisor at Ntiyiso Consulting. Thank you very much for that very valuable insight, because we've got to go deeper.
Yeah.
We just got to go deeper as entrepreneurs. We can't just make a product available. We've got to understand to whom, where, why, as you've just said now. And thank you very much for that. I appreciate you. How do people get in touch with you?
So people can reach me. My website, our website, our business is www.ntiyisoconsulting.co.za. Ultimately, we've got a free line for everyone, which is an email address, which is info@ntiyisoconsulting.co.za.